What if I told you that three companies you've probably never dealt with control the future of almost every major business in the world? Apple, Amazon, Google, Exxon, even Coca-Cola. Behind the scenes, three financial giants are silently pulling the strings: BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. Together, they manage over $24 trillion in assets. That's more than the GDP of the United States. But here's the twist. They don't just manage money. They vote. They influence. And some argue, they rule. In this video, we'll break down how these three firms rose to power, how they influence everything from climate policy to CEO salaries, and why some experts believe this could be the biggest threat to economic democracy since the invention of Wall Street itself. And most importantly, what this means for your money. Because if you invest, save, or even just hold a retirement account, you're likely funding this empire without even realizing it. Let's rewind. In 1975, Vanguard was born with a simple idea: offer low-cost index funds that track the market. In 1988, BlackRock emerged as a risk analytics firm and would later build the largest investment empire the world has ever seen. And in between, State Street quietly grew into a global custodian and fund manager. The rise of these firms wasn't flashy. No big scandals, no media frenzy. They simply rode the wave of passive investing. As more people moved away from trying to beat the market and instead opted to track the market using ETFs and index funds, trillions flowed into funds managed by the Big Three. In 1995, passive funds held just 4% of US stock market assets. Today, over 34%, and most of it is managed by BlackRock, Vanguard, or State Street. Now, here's where things get interesting. When you invest in an index fund, you technically own shares in hundreds or thousands of companies. But you don't vote. They do. Because BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street are the legal custodians of those shares, they control the voting rights at shareholder meetings. And they use them. Combined, they're the largest shareholders in 88% of all S&P 500 companies. That means when it's time to vote on CEO pay, climate policy, board members, or company strategy, these three companies get a bigger say than almost anyone else on Earth. And it's not just about voting. It's about expectation. Imagine a company CEO knowing that a silent investor owns 8% of their stock and could vote to remove them if they don't perform. That's not just ownership. That's leverage. But they're just passive investors, right? Not quite. Despite the name, passive funds can have very active influence. BlackRock, for instance, has a team of governance specialists who hold over 3,000 private engagements with companies every year. That's more than most governments have with their own regulators. They rarely vote against management, less than 10% of the time, but their mere presence changes behavior. It's what researchers call structural power. They don't need to shout. They only need to exist. What's more shocking? In many cases, all the individual funds within each company vote identically. One researcher found that out of 100,000 shareholder votes at BlackRock, only 18 instances involved any internal disagreement. Imagine that. Thousands of individual funds, but one voice. Let's talk consequences. When the same three firms own major stakes in competing companies, strange things can happen. Take airlines, for example. A landmark study showed that when BlackRock and Vanguard held large stakes in multiple airline companies, ticket prices rose. Why? Because firms with overlapping owners may be less incentivized to compete aggressively. This phenomenon is known as common ownership, and it's not limited to airlines. It affects banks, pharma, tech, entire sectors. Think about it. If your competitors have the same shareholders as you, do you really want to race them to the bottom on price? Common ownership may be quietly reducing consumer choice, price competition, and even innovation. This isn't just an abstract financial issue. It affects your money directly. Chances are, if you own a retirement plan, a savings plan, or even use a robo-advisor, you're indirectly invested in the Big Three. So what can you do? Know where your money is. Check if your fund is run by one of the Big Three. Understand how they vote. Many now publish annual stewardship and voting reports. Read them. Choose funds with pass-through voting. Some platforms are starting to let you vote your shares directly. Diversify your strategy. Consider mixing active management, alternative assets, or even direct stock ownership. Most importantly, stay informed. Because while these firms may act in the name of efficiency and long-term value, they don't always act in your best interest. In 2025, several U.S. states, led by Texas, sued BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, accusing them of colluding on ESG agendas. Regulators like the FDIC are questioning whether these firms violate rules meant to limit ownership in banks. And the SEC is exploring new rules to force more transparency in fund voting and disclosure. Reforms like the Index Act aim to return voting power to individual investors. There is growing momentum to democratize capital markets. But the question remains, will these reforms go far enough? Let's take a step back. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street don't own the world, but they control the companies that do. They rose through simplicity, low fees, and public trust. But now, their dominance may be too big to ignore. So the next time you invest in a fund, ask yourself, who controls this money? What are they voting for? And how can I take back some control? Because the more you understand the system, the less you're controlled by it. If you found this video eye-opening, please subscribe because there's more to uncover. We'll be diving deeper into silent financial empires, how global money really moves, and what it means for your money.